This sound was recorded on the 24th of October 1955. I have appointment for Rose Creek, medium Leslie Flint.
Communicator Dr. Charles Marshall. There is a slight hum on the original tape, therefore this is not a very good copy.
What are we going to talk about today?
I think we ought to discuss, rather talk about the spheres.
Yes.
Because there's so much to be said in regard to the spheres. There are so many different conditions.
I'd like to know from the very lowest and gradually go up, Doctor.
I see. Well, I don't particularly feel inclined to take you to the lowest spheres. For the simple reason I don't think any good can be achieved by it, and since I know full well that you have no contact with them whatsoever when you come here, and it's all very depressing, and I don't want to depress you.
I think I would like to go down there when I come over there to see if I can help anybody.
Well, my dear, you'll have free will to choose for yourself if you so wish to do that kind of work, although there again the special training is necessary.
Oh.
Even those who go to the lower spheres to attend and to help those less fortunate, they just can't do it just because they want to do it. It requires a certain amount of training.
How do you mean training?
Well, over here we have colleges, I suppose you would call them, of science colleges, where people can learn all kinds of things which are essential and necessary to their development. And in regard to entering into the lower spheres, you do need a certain amount of education, the method of approach, for instance. You just can't go like a bull into a china shop into one of the lower spheres. Believe me, it could be dangerous, even for a highly evolved soul, even for one who has progressed to a certain degree. To enter into the very low spheres in itself is quite an undertaking. I don't say exactly fraught with danger, but certainly one that can be, to some extent,
Can you get contaminated going there?
Well, to some extent, yes. You see, the point is that the very highly evolved souls do not themselves, or very seldom, enter into the very low spheres. But there are many, many stages of evolution and development, and certain people, not very necessarily highly developed, but at the same time very fine people, spiritually evolved to a point, do choose to go down to low spheres to work and to help. And it is quite an undertaking. You must realize that we on this side are more subject to conditions than anything that you know of in your world. You are subject to conditions. The point is, over here we're much more subject.
Oh.
And if a person chooses to do what we term rescue work or go into the lower spheres to help, they are inclined to be affected by, in some way or other, according to the individual concerned, especially by the conditions in which they find themselves. I do not mean by that the person concerned who acts as a helper or a leader or one who chooses to serve in some capacity in the lower spheres is necessarily made evil or lowers his standard of spirituality by entering into that environment, but it does not alter the fact that one can be and is often affected by lower conditions, the same as, for instance, you, in a sense. Supposing you, a woman of some education, and certainly one who is very highly strung, one who feels intensely and very musical, and is used to a certain standard of life. If you were placed, shall we say, in a slum area, in a depressing place, you would be very much affected by those conditions. You wouldn't necessarily develop into such a person as you would probably find around about you, but you would be affected mentally by that atmosphere. Well, the same applies to those souls who choose to go to the lower spheres to serve and to work. They are affected to some extent by the environment in which they find themselves. And often, when they return to their normal habitation, they do need a great deal of attention. In other words, they have to be reinvigorated, as it were, in a spiritual sense.
How is that done, Doctor?
Well, there are certain places here that are, I suppose you call them kind of clinics or hospitals or places where people can draw away from the environment, their circumstances and so on, or condition, and they are placed in these institutions, or call them what you like, where they receive attention, where they receive a course, if you like, of power, where they are, I don't know how to begin to explain, it's very difficult. You see, the auric emanation which they bring back with them from the lower sphere is such that as soon as they enter into the environment which they are really used to, which is their natural condition, there is a clashing, there is a period when they must gradually be rehabilitated, they must be refreshed, and they must be placed in such a position that they can be invigorated with the conditions of the sphere which they are normally in habitation, and they have to be I don't know how to put this, they have to lose the contamination, as it were, that they brought with them from the other spheres, from the lower spheres.
Well, that all the emanations must be like tentacles.
Well, I can't explain this very well. It's very difficult.
Yes.
If you can imagine a human being, not so much the person, but their auric condition is rather like a sponge, that they absorb whatever is around and about them, and they have to disperse that or reject it and refresh themselves. They have to be renewed with the conditions of their own sphere. And certain people here, you see, you cannot appreciate perhaps, or cannot follow this, I can't explain it very well, but we know much more scientifically, and the word scientifically I use in a very real sense, because our world is scientific in as much that it's a reality. There's much that has yet to be known and discovered. Even in the very sphere in which we may live, there is much that we have yet to find out and discover. You must realize this too, that a sphere, take it as one place, although actually it's a part of many, but the point is that in a sphere it is a habitation, it is a place which has been lived in by untold millions of souls through many generations of passings from your world to this. It isn't a static thing. By that I mean that the individuals concerned don't stay there, they're not static there, but the actual place itself is static inasmuch that people stay there for a period of what you would term time, until they have progressed beyond that stage. Then they pass through a phase what you call death, although it isn't anything like the physical death as you know it.
No, you've explained it.
And new people take over. But remember that the place in which a person may find himself or herself is what previous generations have made possible. And you never can react or respond to anything beyond that phase of existence. You can naturally go down to lower spheres or lower conditions and experience much there. But if you do that, though you may do it in the desire to be of assistance, to help, at the same time, it is a mission that you take upon yourself a great deal of responsibility, and you are bound in some shape or form to be affected by other conditions which you are not used to, which are not natural and normal to you. And in consequence, when you come back into your environment, you do need refreshing. You do need purifying, if you like. You need to discard from your auric emanation and auric self all those conditions and thoughts which you have picked up same as when you go through your physical ordinary material life.
Yes.
You accumulate and assimilate all sorts of experiences, a lot of them which are no good whatsoever to you from a spiritual standpoint.
Yes.
And gradually as you grow older and you look back and you're wiser, you realize how much that has happened was unimportant, unessential, and yet you had to experience it to some extent maybe because it was essential for you to know these things.
Yes.
Otherwise you couldn't grow.
Yes.
You see, we have schools here where people are taught a great deal about human nature and how best to approach, and for instance, an individual in a certain degree or a lack of degree of development, and in consequence you have a working knowledge, if you like, if I can put it like that, of a person and how to work with that person, to help that person, how best probably it is or would be to help that person out of their present environment. But even in spite of all that, it doesn't alter the fact that you may come up against a person or persons that you're trying to help in a low sphere who are extremely difficult. Perhaps a person who, shall we say, has very strong, firm, fixed views, ideas, not necessarily evil, but for instance, some of the greatest difficulties we have are with people who have very strong, fixed, firm religious convictions.
Yes.
I think we've told you before
Yes.
that those who are, as it were, held down tremendously by dogma and creed, although they're not unhappy particularly in their environment, and I wouldn't suggest for a moment they're in an evil environment or even a bad environment, at the same time they are much more difficult to approach, much more difficult to work with, much more difficult to help than perhaps somebody who was, as the world understands it, a pretty bad character. Yet at the same time they had a flexible mind. They weren't sort of, shall we say, held down, tightly bound by high-bound creeds and dogmas. I always feel the most difficult people to help are those who have, for many, many years, their earthly life been bound by creed and dogma.
Yes. You know, some years ago, I believe my father, when I used to be asleep, he used to take me down to the lower stairs. There was one or two people, and one especially that I got very fond of, who lived in the reign of Charles II. And I believe he used to come and talk to me and tell me what help I was to him, and I think he's progressed tremendously now. Have you seen